Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment. We have here a familiar face coming back to us again, former ATF agent Ignacio Esteban. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, buddy. Well, nice to be back here. How you doing, Hollywood Wade?
I'm doing good, my man. Look, you come out with books more than I come out with podcast episodes, man. You seem like you drop a book every week, and we're going to talk about a few of them here today because we touched on a few of them last time. But I seen you just drop one today on the Yakuza. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I did. That's an interesting read. I mean, I saw them a little bit, obviously, through television. You get a little bit of feel for them, but you really don't have an understanding. I mean, they've been around, I didn't realize, for over 400 years, the
Wow.
culture.
I didn't either.
Yeah. And they were a lot in China, but they've expanded a lot through Asia, the United States. Hawaii had a big problem with the Yakuza. Same with the West Coast, LA and San Francisco. It's an organized crime group, very violent. They're involved in drug trafficking, especially with heroin and methamphetamine. They also do, unfortunately, trafficking in minors and women. Very dangerous group. And I started researching them more and more, and I saw how much they have expanded in Japan and also in other places. So I think it's a good read for someone who doesn't know much. I know that Tokyo Vice, it's on HBO Max now. I don't know if you saw that. And I didn't know much about it, so I saw a little bit of the trailer, and it's really interesting about the group itself. I found it interesting that these guys tattoo themselves, full body tattoos, right? And they don't do it the regular way. They do it by hand, and they use bamboo needles or steel needles to do it, and they do their whole body. And I was reading about that, and I found that's pretty. That's been part of their culture for forever. They're doing that, so I found that pretty interesting.
It's like just different, like symbols, or is it just like
they do everything? You go online and you can see how they tat it out, and they take pride and they put it in some of the private areas you don't want to. They do full body up to their wrist, up to their ankles. So that way, because they've adjusted, they become more sophisticated, and you see them now, a lot of them in suits, and their hair slicked out, so they don't want you to see their tattoos.
Well, I was about to say that's kind of a hit and miss, because you can do that for people that would know, but also kind of make you, I guess, easily identifiable to law enforcement or rival gangs or whatever. So that's kind of the downside to it. But I've seen some pictures in the past and some movies to where they are, heavily tattooed, documentaries and things like that.
Yeah, you can see all that online. If you wanted to get an idea, just go online and just type in Yakuza tattoos, and you can get a good feel how they look and what they do, and it's a long process, and it's painful. It's very painful, they were saying.
Well, so I believe it. The ones I got was pretty painful, and I didn't get them nowhere near the places that you're talking about.
Yeah. And a lot of ritual they have there also is the shrinking of their pinky to the joint. If there's a mistake or something going on, I guess it comes back to a samurai tradition where with the sword, getting a good grip was a problem with your pinky. So it has that tradition where they shorten your pinky out. But now it's done more as punishment, or if you made a mistake, you're going to be doing that. So they have some really interesting things that goes on, and very structured from top to bottom. There was one case, and I'll give some examples, just like with the other books there. There was a leader from the Yakuza who was, I feel like, man, this would have been a great case if I could have done it. Who was dealing with an undercover DEA agent out of New York, right?
Wow.
And this is a case, and I talked at length. I read the complaint from the Southern District of New York, and they were doing for over 3 years. And the guy, the Yakuza leader, was brokering a deal for these rebels in Burma and Sri Lanka, right? And they were looking for heavy artillery, and they were also looking for SAMs, surface air missiles, to use out there. So he's broken this deal for the exchange of payment of 500 pounds of meth and heroin.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a big deal. Big deal. They just took the guy. They just took the guys down. If you want to look online, you see the pictures of the guy with the surface air missile on his shoulder, posing and everything else, which is pretty cool. He was a Yakuza. So that was a big thing that just happened. So if your audience wants to read a little more about it, they can see out there. So those guys are here. They're everywhere, and it's global, international, and they're brokering deals for rebel groups around the world, and guns and dogs, and it took them down. So, yeah, they've been around for a while. They do a lot of bad things. Are they as bad as the cartels? Well, I mean, you're killing each other. Do they dismember and all that stuff? Well, maybe not, but
Yeah.
there's
Now,
still bad dudes.
we had a, you talk about guns. I don't think people realize just how many guns are floating around out there in cities that you may not even, think. Like we had a retired ATF agent, Lou Velosi, on the show, whom we spoke about earlier off camera. And he said, I think it was like a year-long sting in that one particular area. They got like 600 and something guns off the street. And you got to think that's just that one location. And that's a lot of guns, man, to get off the street. And that's compared to the guys like what you're just talking about with these surface air missiles, things like that. That's even a different grade. So I'd imagine that number is even higher, but this was just like local street gangs and stuff like that going there and getting that many guns. That's a lot of firepower to be circulating out in the street. And then that's just a town like Georgia. You imagine what you could pull in somewhere like Chicago or, New York, somewhere like that.
It's all over, man. It's all over. I did a lot of cases like that. International firearms trafficking, domestic trafficking. It's also, I talked about in my book also, ATF Undercover. There's a lot of guns. I need the black market. I mean, like I said, you can get it anywhere. You can get these guns anywhere. You get them, order them online. You go through flea markets. You go to gun shows. A lot of these places you don't do background checks, or you do private sales. You do a lot of these private sales. There's no background check. It's a big loophole. It's a big problem. And a lot of these felons and a lot of people, even if they go to the gun stores, a lot of people have fake IDs. And I mentioned in my book, without doing fingerprints like you do for pawn shops, you can be anybody. And you fill up, you put down whatever you want. You got a fake ID, you get your guns, and you go.
So these trade shows where they sell guns, I've never actually bought one from a trade show. They don't run backgrounds there on those.
So some of the flea markets, they have private sales. You're a private sale. You're a private sale.
Wow.
It just required looking ID, right? Make sure you're a resident of the state. You look at identification. That's all you got to do. And you go. Yeah, there's a lot of problems. I know they want to change this where every sale should be a background check. And of course, we talked about these ghost guns where you order the parts and put together. And I think now they're trying to pass federal legislation to make at least background checks on that. But like you said, there's so many loopholes, so many easy ways to get around that. It's one little harder step. But at the end, these guys, if they want it, they're going to get them.
Yeah, I think as long as there's steps put in place to prevent it, there's going to be ways to circumvent it. That's just kind of the cycle of life and how it's always been. If somebody wants something bad enough, they're going to figure out a way to do it. If they make it illegal, they're going to figure out a way around it.
Gun control that really doesn't work that way. Yeah, gun control doesn't work.
No,
because bad guys are not going to be controlled.
Right, they're going to have them anyway.
They're going to find them. They're going to find them. So that's the bad side about that. And I wrote a book about that too. I know about Merchants of Death, and it talks about international firearms trafficking and how people love around the world American-made guns, and how they love not just American-made, all the guns we have imported also, and how easy it is to get them around the world from South America, Mexico, to Canada. Our names around Africa, Europe, Asia. It just goes everywhere, and the guns are being recovered. So,
wow. I worked at a steel mill for years, and I don't know if ours ever did it, but I do remember there was one time to where I don't know if it was ATF or just local law enforcement, but they would bring like guns and, seize stuff, even drugs in some cases, and would put it into our, like basically incinerator. They melted steel out there, and they would put it in there and basically just melt it down. Yeah.
We did that also in Miami. We found a place we can do it also and melt it down. And what do they do with it? They put, what do they make out of them?
Oh man, it just depends on what we made. It would be
manholes. In Miami, they made manholes out of them.
Yeah. Mostly what we did was like I-beams or, some plants do rebar and stuff like that. We were more I-beams and channel and stuff like that. But, there was no telling somebody's Glock could be, putting up a building right now. So.
Yep, you're right. That's what I did a lot. They got rid of them, and that's better that way, because what you hate to see is the gun's supposed to get destroyed and they go back on the street being sold in the black market.
Right.
So that's one way to make sure those aren't going to be guns, but that's never going to stop, because we just churn them out so much that so many bad people find so many ways. And if not, they find people to buy for them, which was called straw purchases, where people go in there and they buy for them, and then they get the guns also. So unfortunately, we do have a lot of loopholes. What we need is people to be more responsible, but obviously criminals are not.
Right.
And that's the fascination of these crime syndicates and crimes. They chose that lifestyle because they did not conform to society. And that's what the Yakuzas are. They are outcasts. They do not conform, and that's a culture that they have in there, which I found interesting. They also recruit a lot of people who are immigrants, because Japanese, I guess, and I didn't know this either, kind of are very like, this is Japan's culture, and you're kind of an outsider. If you see Koreans, they immigrate a lot to Japan, but some of them would go into the Yakuza culture because they weren't considered, they didn't fit in, which I was reading. But they did well because a lot of them would end up becoming bosses, which I found out, which I thought was interesting within the syndicate.
Oh,
so,
I mean, that's motorcycle gangs. A lot of times are the same way. A lot of those were started, back in the day when people were coming back from war and they were still looking for that rush and, something to keep that adrenaline pumping and, getting on those motorcycles and riding with those gangs and everything. That's kind of how they, I guess, were able to feel that same type of feeling. And then, they feel, like you said, outcasts. So they join other people that consider themselves outcasts. And, that whole thing started during the Hollister riots up there, where they had that big fight. And then I don't know if it was a reporter or somebody come out and said, 99% of, all motorcycle riders are law abiding citizens. Just that 1% that's, causing all the trouble. And man, they grabbed a hold of that and rode with it, and are still riding with it today. That's why you see the 1%er, patch on a lot of the, real notorious MC clubs. Is that's where all that come from.
That's the title of my book too. 1%ers.
Yeah.
Biker gangs.
You done another one about Havana and what's hell? I'm
Castro and the mob.
Name, but Castro. Yeah. Now that's something that's always interested me, and we do a lot of shows involving organized crime and the mob down there. But Meyer Lansky, from what I understand, lost a lot of money because he was pumping up casinos over there, and then Castro just took them over. Tell us a little bit about that, like what sparked your interest on that and kind of how you dove in and started with your research on that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Obviously, my family heritage, obviously, is part of it. My family, Spanish, my grandparents came to Cuba, and because of the Cuban Castro regime, the communist revolution, we ended up coming to the United States. And my family, I was born here and raised here, but very anti-Castro, very anti-communist, based on his anti-American, anti-capitalist, and his nationalist views and what he did. So that was part of it. Also, I knew about it, obviously not from the Godfather. The Godfather movies do talk about it a little bit, and they're very accurate. There's scenes they do have about it, especially the scene where January 1st, 59, you see Batista, who was a dictator of Cuba at the time, when the mafia is looking and they're seeing him heading out the New Year's party, and he heads on the plane and he gets out of the country because he knows the rebels are going to win and it's over. And the mindset was, when I was reading and everything else, was, okay, he was a dirty dictator. We gave him payouts from the percentages we made. Lansky was called the accountant. He was even given a position, this is how corrupt it was at the time in the 50s, as their head of gambling casinos for Cuba. He was even given a pay for being there. So they thought Castro would be the same thing. We paid him a percentage. He was happy. He got 10% of the cut. Plus we gave him this X, Y, and Z. And then the Cubans government would even match him dollar for dollar, which is unbelievable, to build more of these casinos and gambling. That's how it was just getting out of control, the corruption. And I think that's what part of the Castro regime was part of that. Well, okay, if you got rid of that, that would have been fine. But it got worse because he nationalized. So when he took over, and I wanted, before I tell that story, but I'll tell this part and then I'll go back to where I originally wanted to start. Lansky and Trafficante think, because San Trafficante also had a lot of businesses in there also. I mean, he raised his family there. I know they would go back to Tampa, but Meyer Lansky had the Havana Riviera, and he spent a lot of money in there, and he was making millions of dollars, and they were well invested. Trafficante also saw it, and these guys thought, okay, just like when Castro comes, we're going to be doing the same thing as we did with Batista. It didn't work out that way, and they saw the end coming. Lansky is able to leave the day before an airplane from Havana to Miami. He flies out before Castro and the rebels come into Havana. He gets out. Traficante decides, I'm going to write it out and see if I can work with this guy. He ends up putting him in a Cuban prison. Traficante ends up doing almost a year in a Cuban prison because Castro didn't care for these guys. First thing he does is he saw this as a very, he was tired of it. It was, to him, it was he was anti-capitalist, anti-American, anti-imperialist. And this represented everything that he thought was wrong growing up in Cuba in the 50s and 40s. And he did not like that this Americana had took it over the island. And he was tired. And the mob represented a problem.
Right. I did not know that Santo done a year over that. I did not know that.
Yeah. It was bad. I mean, he was even asking his daughter. I mean, he raised his family in Cuba. His daughter, of wealth, educated, was getting married August of 1959, right? He's still in jail. And Castro says, no, you're going to stay there. You're not going to go to the wedding. And he was one of the richest guys. So imagine that, a few months earlier, you're one of the richest guys. And now you're sitting in jail while your daughter's getting married and you can't go. So that's he went from Castro going in the mountains fighting Batista's army to now being the guy and pretty much just nationalizing, taking over and getting rid of the mobsters, pretty much cleaning house. Lansky leaves penniless. He loses the Havana Riviera. He goes back.
And he sunk a lot of money into that too.
Yeah. And Traficante ends up losing everything himself. And eventually when he's done his time, he goes back to Tampa. And all these guys are cleaned out by the time that goes. So to put it in context, how did they get there, right? How did the mobsters get to Havana and making this their empire, pretty much? And this is all fascinating to me because obviously it goes into history, but I started really doing a deep dive in this. And I saw that in the rum running age, Prohibition, a lot of the mobsters start setting up early operations in Cuba because of Prohibition. In the US, we couldn't have it. In Cuba, they can't. So they had a lot of rum runners, and they had other things else, and that was being very lucrative for them back in the 20s and 30s. It gets bigger. By the time it hits the 40s, right after World War II, Lucky Luciano, he ends up getting deported from the US. Right? That was part of the agreement.
Yeah, when he got out of prison.
Yeah, but he has to get deported. He goes to Italy, he goes to Sicily, and he makes a pretty good connection through Africa for heroin. He said, okay, this looks promising here. What I'm reading. He wants to set up a major conference in Havana, like the mob hasn't seen since Atlantic City, which is the famous 46 conference with at the Havana Hotel Nacional, which is a gorgeous hotel built 1930. If your viewers or audience has a chance to look it online, it's almost 100 years old. It's not as nice what it was, but it's like a palace. A who's who would stay there. When you go to Havana, you would stay there, and the views of the water, phenomenal, and of Havana, amazing views. Yeah, too bad now it's not what it used to be, but back in the day, it was something. Wow. So Luciano wants to do this conference. They haven't had a major one like this in Atlantic City back that he did in the 30s. He's deported. He can't get back to the U.S. His plan is to make Cuba now, not just a for the mobster Italians, but he wants to form a multi-ethnic, like super crime syndicate, was his plans, with the Irish, Spanish, Jews. And that's when Meyer Lansky and these guys become a big part of Cuba and what goes on there. So, excuse me. All right, so he's able to get into Cuba. You can't do this in the United States. He invites everybody. This is 1946. And this is where they have the picture there of the conference, which is true. Everything it shows, these guys, who's who showed up. I mean, you have who's running the Luciano family, Frank Costello, all these guys from New York, they come down. Marcelo's from New Orleans come over. Sam Giancana, which is going to be an interesting figure in reference to Castro later.
Yeah.
He represents the Chicago outfit. He comes down also. I mean, you got a ton of anybody, the Traficante family, they're all there already in Cuba, senior and junior. I mean, this is becoming a really big thing. Even Frank Sinatra, according to the list, was there at the conference as a guest. Meyer Lansky. I mean, it is just everybody's out there. Jewish, everybody's out there, and he has an idea to change it all. And three big
Marcelo things, was out there, Carlos Marcelo.
That's according to the list and everything they said. All these big names, you name it, everybody who was anybody came out there. Three big things came out of that thing. The first thing was Luciano wanted to make himself the boss of all bosses.
Mm-hmm.
Since he couldn't be now the boss of the Luciano family because he's been deported, Frank Costello is, he wants to run the commission.
Mm-hmm.
He now wants to be the one running all the families commission. First, there was some pushback, but he got Costello on board. He got some other family guys to agree with him, and they agreed, okay, fine. They voted to make him, and that's the famous conference. He became the boss of all boss. The second thing is, based on his connections in Africa, he said, we're gonna be trafficking big time in heroin. So they said the mob didn't like trafficking heroin. No, the mob been trafficking heroin for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1946 is when Luciano said, this is where we're going to make our real money now. According to everything I was reading and researching. And what he does, he says Tampa is a good port to smuggle it in. New York City is going to be another one. And New Orleans. So he has the Marcelo family, Traficante, and of course his group and the other families will be taking care of that. And it's easier to get them in because they have everybody paid in Cuba, and they have the guys paid on that side also. So they got both sides covered up with corruption. How are they going to, and they become major heroin traffickers from 1946 on. That was a big thing changed with them. And also to work with the other syndicates, other groups, not just Italians, but they start working a lot with the Jews, with the Jewish groups also. And Meyer Lansky became a big part of that and growing up. And they also agreed also to work with Bugsy out there in Las Vegas and the Flamingo Hotel. So a lot of groups now working together and they're trying to work because of course it brings more revenue, more money.
Right.
So that's where it is. And it just balloons. So with all those years, by 1950s coming around, then you have Batista, who is a corrupt dictator in Cuba. And the payouts are big. He takes it and it just grows enormously with the casinos, the gambling, everything. Everything is huge in Cuba and it becomes a big moneymaker for these guys. And they like it because they're doing the trafficking with drugs to the United States and they're making all the money also in Cuba. So that's all the pictures you have there from the Godfather movies and what happens. It all changes though when Castro and the rebels win the war against Batista and the army, and it all collapses very quickly, and nationalizes and takes it out. So that all ends pretty much when he wins in January 1st, 59, and it ends quickly. And you look online, you see the pictures, and you can see them just the casinos that's getting crushed and all that stuff, and it's over. It's over. The mob loses everything. And Meyer Lansky says, you know what? Years later, he was interviewed, and he goes, I rolled, bad hand on that one, and that's it. What can I do? He almost died, almost broke. I mean, he left his family like less than $60,000.
That's what I heard, that he had put a lot of what he personally had squared away, hid away, whatever, however you want to put it, a lot of his own personal proceeds into that hotel and casino down there. And then when it got taken over, I mean, he was just, he's out of that money. He's not going to be able to go back and get it back.
No.
So that put a hurting on him for sure.
Yeah. No, you're not going to get anything back from when the communists nationalized things. It's over. And same thing as you look at China, North Korea. You look at any country where it has to deal with communism. They have the mindset. They're like Robin Hood. You take from the rich and give to the poor. They just crushed you, and they crushed them. So this leads to an interesting. Now I took two of the sides. There's a lot more to the book. So you have that idea what's going on there. Traficante's in jail. He just gets out. He's not a happy camper. I mean, he was a rich guy, and he spent almost a year in a Cuban prison. Not a happy guy. He missed his daughter's wedding. Meyer Lansky lost everything there. The mob's lost a lot of money. They're not getting any kickbacks himself or anybody. So now you're looking at 1960, end of 1960. Kennedy wins a tight election against Nixon, but doesn't like what's going on because he spent a lot of time in Cuba also. You see the pictures of Kennedy. Kennedy was a playboy, and he also liked, as a senator, he enjoyed his time in Cuba, and he also enjoyed people. And it was bothering because Castro was becoming very close with Khrushchev and the Soviet Union. And that's becoming a big problem for the United States. And they want to put missiles also. And it gets worse, the situation. So the CIA, Kennedy then reaches out, according to all the what's been declassified and everything else. Kennedy administration with his brother, Robert, who is the Attorney General, have the CIA do secret ops and have him contact a not retired, I think he's a former FBI agent who happened to also be the only private investigator for Howard Hughes. His name was Robert Mayhew. I mean, I'm mispronouncing his last name. But they tell him, contact your sources in the mob, but don't tell them you're working for the CIA. Tell me you're working for some private company that's upset, that wants to pay back for Castro because American companies got crushed. From Coca-Cola to everybody else, they lost everything. He nationalized everybody. So, everybody's families lost a lot of things. You had business in Cuba, he nationalized it. So imagine that one day you have a nice home. They say, no, you know what? The colonel here likes your house. We need you guys to leave the house now. So that's the kind of messed up things. And our families went through it, and everybody went through it. That's when you leave, you pretty much leave empty-handed, like Lansky did, and you say, okay, now we got to start a new life. And that's what happened to, my family, many other families dealing with the Castro regime. So that's the plan with him. So I said, okay, he knows Johnny Roselli. Roselli is in the West Coast representing the Chicago outfit. They meet in Las Vegas, and then Mayhew pitches to him, hey, listen, this group I'm working for, they want Castro dead. You know the people that can kill Castro for us, and we're willing to pay you about $150,000 to do it. And he said, you know what? Let me talk to the guys, but you're not going to have to pay us. That's something we all want to do, because they lost a lot. And that's something, listen, you don't have to pay us for that. And that was something that he would later testify in front of the Senate committee in 75 about that. And that's one thing that, the mafia did not want money to kill Castro because they lost so much. They want him out. They say, you don't have to pay us for that.
Yeah.
So he then introduces them in Florida to Trafficante and Sam Giancana, because obviously he was also with the Chicago outfit. He comes out, and then all of a sudden he has a lot of contacts in Cuba. So they provide a lot of money, and everything what I read and what's out there was that he said, well, what ideas you had? And of course, Giancana came up with the idea. I think I have people in there who are close enough to him, to Castro, that we can poison him, that we can kill him either in his food, drinks, or his cigar. Because remember, Castro loves to smoke a lot of cigars, and they thought they could get him through his cigars also. So they tried for months, different with informants working out there, and this is odd. You have the CIA, pretty much, indirectly working with the mob to kill Castro.
Yeah, there was from some of my research, there was like a meeting specifically like at a hotel, and from what I remember, I want to say like Momo or Sam Giancana wanted like a wire set up in a room or something like that to try to spy on somebody. That was like one of the things that he did ask for. I can't remember all the specifics of that, but I know it was like something that they did where the wire got found.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember hearing anything about that in your research or not.
I know that there was also a connection between a mistress that Kennedy had and one that he had together, and there was more information.
Yeah. That's supposedly that was one way they would share messages back and forth was through her.
Yeah, I was saying that. Right. And that's unfortunate. It's the history of the president, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole thing, and so they tried for about a few months, and then they said, forget this ain't working. And then the CIA, obviously with Kennedy, said, try for the Bay of Pigs. So then they tried the invasion, and that was a debacle, because at the end they pulled out of the air support they needed for these were Cuban exiles trained by the CIA in Guatemala to then invade through that area. And without this right air support, it was a disaster. It only lasted a few days, and that was over. And then it gets more serious with the Cuban Missile Crisis, where we almost go to World War III then, because of what's happening there. And then the agreement is, okay, we'll stay out of Havana, but you can't put missiles in Cuba.
Right.
And that ends up being the Kennedy-Khrushchev agreement that keeps Castro in power for all these years.
Wow. But how old was he when he finally went? Or
he was late 80s.
Yeah, he made it a long time, man. Surprising.
And his brother's still alive. Raul is still alive. He's 90 and he's still up there. So I don't know how much longer he has. But that's one thing I put in the book too. The younger generation, they're not part of that revolutionary group. They inherited a broken communist regime. So I'm not sure how much longer. Like anything else, communism doesn't last forever. It's like the Soviet Union fell apart. You have Putin with his ideas now, but we talked about that on the last show. I just don't see it happening with the West being so strong. It'll be changing in Cuba. Same with China. I also wrote about that in Xi Jinping's book about genocidal dictator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just people want freedom. You can't be a tyrant and tyranny and controlling and doing things like that without consequences and pushback. Look at the lockdowns in China now.
Mm-hmm.
How bad they are. People just they're fed up with it. I mean, here we were tired of wearing the masks.
Yeah.
Then we're just like, no, enough of this already. And it looks like our immune system is probably better than it was other countries, because they said we're in better shape than most countries are.
Yeah.
Nice place to start trying, and we're in great shape. We moved on.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird, the timing, but I'm almost not hearing quite as much about, the COVID anymore, especially since the whole Ukraine and Russia thing started up. It's like
We're fine.
the COVID kind of got shifted to the right and out of the way. I'm not saying it's still not prevalent and, people don't start getting it, but, it's just not as dangerous. The danger talk has died down quite a bit.
I think so. I mean, obviously, if you're in a certain age group, or you have pre-existing conditions or serious pulmonary type, obviously you still protect yourself, but you're a healthy individual.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's much problem anymore right there. And we have the vaccines also on top of that. So I think if you've been vaccinated and you're healthy, like, I think we're in good shape. I think we're in good shape. The Chinese have taken the wrong approach on this big time. I mean, Shanghai, one of the largest cities, they shut it down. They're destroying their economy, and it's still going to be there. And the virus is still going to spread. It's not working.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wrote that book, but I don't know if you saw the one I did on Biden, which is, I know we're talking a little politics here. We went from Cuba, but it's really a gem that I wrote there. Joe Biden, one and done.
Mm-hmm.
And especially with the issues we're having with the inflation. It was the worst inflation we've had in 40 years.
Oh God, man. I posted on my Facebook today, actually, I guess a year ago. Maybe it was, I guess, it come up in the memory. So I guess it was a year ago today. And I don't know if maybe one of the stimulus checks they hit or something like that, but I made a post. I said, you better make sure you get all the gas you can now, because a year from now, gas will be $4 a gallon. And I'm like, well, sure as shit. Or I said $4 plus. And I was like, well, sure as shit. Look at it now. A lot of people don't realize how long Biden has been around. Like, he was even involved back in like the Jimmy Hoffa Teamster days and stuff like that. Like, Biden has been around for a long time.
Yeah, he's the ultimate career politician.
Mm-hmm.
He was elected to the Senate in Delaware in the early 70s.
Yeah.
So Nixon administration.
I don't know if he had a part, maybe, because I read the book, I Heard You Paint Houses, which was the basis for the movie The Irishman that had Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, and all those guys about Frank Sharon. And he was, I don't know if he was mentioned in the book or if he was actually a character in the movie, but I know he was in one of them. It might have been the book, because it's been a while since I've read it. But I mean, he was dealing with those things way back then. And, obviously everything that went on with the Teamsters, giving some of their funds to the mob to build the casinos out in Las Vegas. All that was dirty way back then. And Biden's been right there with his hands in somebody else's pockets, and probably people in his as well, for years. And I guess people just don't really, realize exactly how long he's been out there in the midst of everything political wise. Like you said, lifelong politician.
Lifelong politician. He's almost, he's 80. And do we want him to have a second term? And age is a big factor here, Boyd. Do we want him to be mid-80s in dealing with China and Russia and everything? I mean, mid-80s, a lot of people are struggling to do basic things. You think he'll have the faculties to be president of the United States in mid-80s?
No, I don't think he's got them now, to be quite honest.
Yeah, a lot of people think he's struggling as it is now. He's struggling. State of the Union address, it looks like he's struggling.
He can't even read a goddamn teleprompter. I mean,
he is struggling. He's struggling. And I still blame, and these are the factors I put why I make the case he won't win in 2024. And I make the factor right there. So if you want to know what I think is going to happen, my 2 cents is midterm, it's going to be a repeat of history. What happened in 2012? 2010, when Obama and them got shellacked and they lost the House and the Senate. And like in 94, when Bill Clinton also lost the House, first time in 40 years. He's almost like another Jimmy Carter in many ways. He's up there in age. He has made bad foreign policy decisions, And I think the exit in Afghanistan was atrocious. And those dead service members, military members, are in his hands. Because how do you not prepare for plan B or C in case the Afghan forces don't hold up and help get people out of Kabul through the airport and get your own people out? There has to be, you got to hold them out until you get your people out. You can't expect the Taliban to do security for you. The enemy we fought for 20 years. And they killed their own, and they killed those people there. No, that was a heinous attack, and that was poorly executed. I think most Americans won't forget that. Crime is the worst it's been in years. People are petrified to go to the New York subway system. You're seeing all the attacks are happening like you've never seen throughout the country. The border's not secure. The wall has not been finished. I mean, these are case after case why he's not going to win. He's very unpopular, and his approval ratings are almost as bad as Trump had them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a combination where I'm not going to see Biden. And once the Republicans take over the House and possibly, I think the Senate, it's over. He gets nothing accomplished, and he just goes right down there. The key is who runs. Well, I mean, there's quite a few guys who might. I mean, I know Ron DeSantis has been called the protege of Trump, and is very popular in Florida because he stood up to the COVID crowd, and business stayed open. I mean, look at Florida. That's my home state. Even though I live in Virginia now, look at Florida, the business, how successful compared to New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Como those guys shut down.
Do you think Trump runs again?
That's interesting. The only funny you asked me that. The only person I thought Biden could beat again would be Trump. That's the only person I thought Biden could beat again was Trump. So I would say if Trump want to be helpful, useful, I think it's time for a new generation. I think people want to see fresh blood, right? A new young blood. And DeSantis showed himself. He was in Congress. He's been a good governor. He has common sense. He's very pro-business, right? That's what we're looking for. And he will definitely, I think, beat Biden. I mean, I think he would just crush Biden. And and the Republicans will have the trifecta in 2024 and the Supreme Court.
Yeah. I think the last two elections, in my opinion, I think Hillary would have won if she would have faced anyone else. But I think people hated Hillary. More people hated Hillary than hated Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And then by the time his term was up, I think Donald Trump had pissed so many people off and made so many enemies that more people hated him than they did Joe Biden. So it wasn't a matter of putting one particular person in there to do the job or whatever. It unfortunately became a popularity contest of who's hated the least.
That's right.
And put them in there, as opposed to putting people in those positions, which is the ultimate position of power, to help, straighten things out in this country. Now, Trump did do some good things as far as policy stuff like that with his, did he piss people off? Did he have the best, mannerisms and stuff like that? Yeah. But like most successful people in businesses and even, go to sports, football, Bill Belichick's probably one of the best, head coaches there is of pro football. No bedside manner, not somebody you think you could hold a conversation with, really just rude most of the time, doesn't talk, pisses people off. Bill Parcells was the same way. I think there's a certain way that people like that are, and they're not going to come off as the most friendliest of people. But that I'm not putting a president in a seat or voting for a president to be his friend. I want him to do shit good for the United States.
That's what we all want. Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people have let, lead their way in voting. Oh, I ain't voting for him because he said this to so-and-so. I don't give a shit what he said to so-and-so. I want to put somebody in there who's going to let me ride around town on $2 worth of gas or $2, a gallon gas. I can get around and not $5 a gallon. This is ridiculous what we're doing there.
No, we need to come up with and that's why a lot of people are going to electric cars now. I've seen so many people going out to electric cars now, and I'm looking into it also because if this continues a trend, this is not sustainable.
No, it's not
sustainable. This is not sustainable at all.
It's nuts. I mean, we got 3 cars, and one of the cars is kind of like an extra car. We don't really drive it. It was my daughter's, and when she started college, she bought her own car, and so we kept it, and just as an emergency vehicle, if something happened. And it's a Lincoln Aviator, it's an older car. And I was at the gas pump the other day. I was pumping gas, and I got a bad habit of just getting back in the car, making phone calls or whatever. and I wasn't really paying it much attention. And I happened to look over, and the numbers are just still going. And it's not got an 8, it was like 89. And I'm like, holy shit, it's still going. I had to hop out and undo that thing. I was like, I don't know how big that tank is, but Jesus,
That's a big tank. That's
yeah,
a big tank sucking up more there.
yeah, I got a Cadillac, and I mean, filling that thing up, I'm at, 50, 55. That thing was almost at $90. It was still going. It didn't even stop. I had to stop. I was just like, Jesus Christ, 90's enough.
And where was the needle when you're done?
I think it was just under, like maybe, I probably had about another $5 probably to go.
To fill it up.
It wasn't all the way full, but it was pretty damn close. But still,
just like, it's funny. I was filling up yesterday at the gas station next to my daughter's school before I take her to soccer. And somebody had put, this is too funny. Somebody had put stickers on every gas pump there, had a little picture of Joe Biden right next to the price.
Yeah.
And it says, I did that.
Yeah, they do that. They've done that around here a bunch, man. And I've seen, there's a gas station right near where I work at on my day job, and he's out there with a little scraper. And I see him doing that. I just kind of chuckled. And I said, the Biden stickers. And he just shook his head. He's like, yeah. And I was just laughing. He said, don't get me wrong. He said, I think it's funny. He said, but when you got to scrape off about 100 of these a week, he said, it's not funny anymore. And I said, well, I get that too. But I guess soon as they scrape off,
that's been out there for a while. I don't think they care.
No, they don't. But you can see they'll sell them in like packs of 100 for like $5. So people would just give them out to people to just put on these damn pumps.
Put them on there. I did that. Oh my God. So that's how unpopular. I mean, going back to how I think Trump would have won the election in 2020 if it wasn't for COVID and the economy took a tank.
Yeah.
And he was perceived as all these people were dying and there's no vaccine yet, and the test kits were crap, and things weren't happening right. It was just a perfect storm for him to lose. It really was. I mean, that just crushed him. If things, I think if it was 2019 before the whole virus kicked in, his numbers were pretty good.
Oh yeah,
he would have won. He would have won, but he had bad luck and got crushed. Just like Biden, he's trying to think he's going to try to correct this inflation. 2 years of suffering like this, with groceries, gas, you name it, in buying homes, cars, furniture, people can't wait to get rid of him. It's like it was too much influx of liquidity, too much stuff was spent, and now people had too much income, too much money, and it was a perfect storm for Biden, the economy, and everything else that's going on. And it's just he's got too many things to do with it, and he hasn't got anything. He had the House and the Senate, and nothing got really done. Infrastructure. I mean, you had everything. You can't even get your own party to get on board on anything. That shows the Democrats can't lead.
Yeah.
If your own party, you have the House and the Senate, and you're the president, and you can't get things done, that's a big problem. Yeah. And that's why they have a divided party. I mean, mention them, you have the moderates and you have the socialists. Mm-hmm. They can't function together in the same party. So that's what I think. That's another reason why you're going to see a big collision and people want to change. They want a party that gets together. But they have to get together because remember, Trump had some issues in 2016 also, getting things passed also. So they got to be able, it's easy to be a party that opposes, but when it's time to lead, you got to be able to lead.
Right. And that's another thing that I think people aren't versed in exactly what all a president can do. Just because they're president, you can't just put a law straight into power and has it go. It's still got to go in front of everybody and get passed and voted on. So if it doesn't get voted on, there's to a certain extent, the president's hands is tied when it comes to passing laws and things like that.
Yeah. But when you have both House and Senate in your party,
you should get it passed.
You should get everything passed. Everything you want gets passed. And you can't do that.
Numbers are in your favor.
You can't do that. That's a big problem. That's a big problem. So it's going to be a lot worse for them after this election, this midterm. Things are going to get really bad. And don't be surprised. You hear it from me that they open up their own case in Congress on Hunter Biden. You already have a major case up in Delaware. United States Attorney's Office already has a major case open on that. And I was reading about that in detail, what's coming out of that. And there is a lot of ties. I mean, remember who Hunter is, everything I've read about him. He's a recovering alcoholic. He had recovered drug addiction, crack cocaine. He really had no experience in this, but yet, because of his father's connections, he's getting paid by these different companies from the Ukrainians and the Chinese a lot of money for, look at me, legal advice and other things. Come on, man. Come on, that's just for access. The only question becomes, where would this leave and what questions is asked about Joe Biden and what happened with him?
Yeah.
And of course, the famous laptop that was recovered at the computer store. What about what more information is coming out of that one?
Oh, good God. Didn't they say they got like a shitload of pictures on there and I guess some maybe indecent exposure pictures of him as well and all kinds of other stuff. That dude's into some crazy shit, man. I mean, I don't know. Did you see that interview he did where he was talking about all he had been up for days and doing drugs and stuff like that?
Yeah, no, he's a mess. He's a mess there, and his dad's helped him out a lot, but he's done some things, and also Joe Biden's brother also was involved, and he's also being looked at because he was also being paid a lot by these different companies for his expertise. What expertise do they have with the energy field, energy sector? Neither one of them has any experience in the energy sector, and the Chinese are paying them a lot, and so were the Ukrainians. So that's a famous was Zelensky, where Trump is kind of pressuring him to start the investigation on him before the election. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And Zelensky's like, I understand what you're saying. That's actually, I'm not agreeing with you. I understand what you're saying. Poor guy now. Now you look at his situation now, and his whole world's turned upside down. And it's just horrible situation that's going on in the Ukraine.
What do you think is going to be the end result with this? I mean, how do you think this is going to end? I know we touched on that last time, and we had talked about the possibility of maybe somebody doing a hit on Putin inside of his own regime, but I don't know if that's going to happen right now. I mean, the Ukrainians, to their credit, they're fighting their ass off over there. But I mean,
yeah,
what do you think is going to be the end result here? How does this end?
I think it's going to be proactive. I think it'll keep on. This could be a lengthy war, very lengthy war. It can be a proxy war where we're going to keep on supplying a lot of military equipment to the Ukrainians, and they're going to keep on fighting because they don't want to give up part of their country. They don't want to give up Crimea. They don't want to give up. They've already lost so many people. And you see probably you've seen it too, Wade. The picture of them being executed, tied up, execution style. I mean, he's a war criminal. He's a war criminal. He's give the orders. Everybody knows he runs. This is a dictatorship. He's a tyrant. And I put that in my book before, Putin's Tyranny. I put this in my other book here, Freedom versus Tyranny, The Battle for Ukraine. I mean, a lot more details, what's going on. Interesting, good reads, short reads. And it's good to look at them because you can see what this guy is. The oligarchs are getting tired of him. They're losing a lot. Everybody wants a change from him. The question is, I think he can write it out, but I don't think he can handle a high body count. So you keep on getting a lot more of the Russian military, a lot more deaths. It's going to have an impact, and the people themselves have to handle this. The Russian people themselves are going to have to say enough is enough. Like one person said, you can't kill us all.
Right.
You can't kill us all. And they confront the Kremlin, it's going to fall. Like every bad dictator, Hitler, Mussolini, anyone else, when the masses get tired of it, they get tired of it. And I think it has to come in from the Russian people. And they have a lot of dissidents, and it has to come from them to put this bad person down. It's a bad dog, needs to be put down. And that's what he is, one way or the other. How they handle him, hopefully sooner than later for the Ukrainians' sake, because it is I don't know if you watch a lot of the video, but it's heartbreaking to watch that.
Yeah. I've actually got a friend of the show. Her name's Oksana Lada. She, we talked about Sopranos last time. She played Tony's girlfriend for like the first 3 or 4 seasons. Ironically enough, she actually played a Russian in the series, but she is actually Ukrainian. And she posts a lot of stuff about what's going on over there, man. And it's truly heartbreaking of everything that's going on, especially some of the videos, like you said, of the execution and stuff like that. I mean, it's just, I can't even imagine what they're going through right now. But as I've said before, kudos to, I mean, they are fighting their ass off over there.
Yeah, they're fighting their ass off. And there's a lot of people from the United States have gone over there to help out too. They volunteered with military training, law enforcement training, and they're fighting too. A lot of people go out there. I think they were just former Marines were just killed out there fighting, trying to take on the Russians and everything else. And that's what it's going to be. I think it's going to, Putin's kind of hunker down. And I think he's stubborn. He doesn't want to handle defeat. And I think after, it's going to be at least, I have to say, at least another year or so. It looks like maybe more of this. And but the Ukrainians have lost so much already. They say, no, we're fighting all the way. You already killed so many. We're going to fight you, and we want you out of our country. The Russians, I need to go. And I think a lot of Russians themselves see it this way. It's just find the propaganda over there. Everything I'm looking at is the state media just has a lot of people who don't get information from other sources, brainwashed to believe that denazification BS that's coming out of Putin was Zelensky himself is Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
His family himself, back during World War II were executed by Nazis, death camps, and Holocaust. So this is the biggest lie, bullshit that's ever been by any head of state or any leader, and to justify a war like this, especially in our century. So I think most people wish nothing good for Putin. He's killed a lot of his dissidents, a lot of his enemies very brutally, and I think most people wish the same for him. There's no doubt about that.
No, I agree 100%. What you had another book, I think, in the middle of some of those other ones, because you pump them out and you share them to our page, and we're glad we share that with our listeners. So keep doing that, please. What are some of the other ones that you wrote since we've talked?
Well, I did a real interesting one here, and since I kind of was bothered with the high oil prices, there's really no need. I mean, Biden made a request with the OPEC and the Saudis, especially to lower oil prices, and they really haven't respected it. It seems like it's still staying pretty high. Mm-hmm. So I was doing a lot of research here on. I titled the book "Blood, Money, and Oil: The Corrupt Saudi Regime of Mohammed bin Salman."
That's it. Blood, money, and oil.
He's the crown prince, for your viewers and audience doesn't know, of Saudi Arabia right now, and his father is King Salman, his father, and he pretty much rode his coattails all the way to that position.
Right.
Not really nothing else other than being the son of now the king, and being a Saudi so-called royal, which really means gangster. You can substitute royal and call them gangsters. What they do out there, because they don't have democratic institution. They don't have they run things like the mafia of a tyranny, and if you oppose them or do anything else, you're done. You're gone. So if you're a critic of them, it's bad news. And a perfect case in point, I'm glad you brought this up, and hopefully your audience can look this up and see outrage in this, and it just shows how much of a corrupt regime these guys are, is the Washington columnist named Jamal Khashoggi. Mm-hmm. Khashoggi, I don't know if you're familiar with what happened here in 2018. He was a big critic of the Saudi regime, of the family. He actually used to work for them, and he did a lot of things. He was an author, he was a writer, he was an editor for a prominent Saudi news agency, and then he had to go in exile, because once you start criticizing and doing things like that, bad things happen.
Right.
Really bad things. I'll give you a quick example. If I go back to that story, they just executed a record in Saudi history, modern Saudi history, 81 people. And all of them were dissidents, minorities, and people who they thought deemed a problem. And you know how they execute over there? No. Beheadings. Beheadings. They do beheadings in Saudi Arabia. They do the executions with beheadings. So those are the kind of people you're dealing with over there. So you think of royals, you think of, they're sophisticated. No, these people are savages out there. And I don't say that kindly. I say it because all the stuff I've been researching and finding out about it. And looking at the history, talking to people that there's a problem here. So it's 2018, and you have Jamal Khashoggi, and I'm mispronouncing his name, is Khashoggi. He's now an American resident. He was in exile because of his criticism of the crown prince, with his Mohammed bin Salman. And he's been criticizing him for years, and is tired of it. They don't like him. He goes to Istanbul. He has his fiance out there. They're going to get married. They got to get paperwork for the marriage, so they have to go. Since he's a Saudi citizen, he has to go to the embassy in Istanbul, the Saudi embassy in Istanbul, to get it. He applies for paperwork, and allegedly, because what I'm reading, a Saudi agent is there. He recognizes Jamal's there. And they tell him, hey, tell him to come back in about a week or so, and he'll have the paperwork. They said, okay, come back a week, and then you come back in the paper. He leaves. Everything has been documented, investigated. He flies back to Saudi Arabia, Riyadh, the capital. And I guess Amin goes up and say, hey, what can you do about this? I guess whoever in charge decides to send a full team, a death squad, back to Istanbul. You're going to get a full team. So this kind of operation doesn't get approved unless it's the highest level, because this guy's hated. It's obviously they don't like this guy. So talking about this could have been the crime of the century. Think about this if it wasn't what's going on in Ukraine, and this is how how bad this whole situation is. Guy works for the Washington Post. He's a columnist. He's in Turkey trying to get married. He's a critic of this regime. He has family here that U.S. citizens, right? He's out there. He comes back for the week. They stay for the week. He gives his gate. You have the video. So you see the video of him there. What you do also see before all that, I'll backtrack a little bit. You see all these Saudis who are agents working for them coming in. They've shown that they stay at different hotels, different identifications, and they're coming in. They even have a guy who's a lookalike who looks just like him come in there also. Keep that in mind, what's going to happen here. So he comes in, and what they don't know, the Saudis don't know, is that the Turkish government has the embassy wired. So everything that happens, they record it. So the murder is recorded. So this is one thing that they were not anticipating what's going to happen here. So he goes inside, and according to the recording, because all this was then sent to the CIA, the government, and then it was released later. So I read the transcripts of what was being said there and what happens. And first thing comes almost right after the door closes. He goes, "You guys can't be doing this." And this is translated, but roughly says, "You guys can't be doing this. I have people waiting for me outside." And the next thing you hear is, "I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe." And the next thing you hear is the sound of a saw. They're dismembering him.
Oh,
Absolutely dismembering him. Yeah, they're dismembering him. That's how much they want to dispose of the guy. Not only did they dismember him, they disposed of the body with an incinerator right there, a furnace. They put the body parts in there to get rid of it. They don't want any poor ashes. They want to get rid of him. They don't want any trace of him. There's blood all over the floor. They send the carpets to be dry cleaned. I mean, they show the steps they took to cover up. They have a link of phone calls being made by the Saudi agents back to Saudi Arabia saying, "Hey, boss, everything's done, taken care of." So this is a massive conspiracy. They're going to go from the top, hushing somebody who's a critic of this dirty regime that's going on, who works here for the Washington Post. He's a columnist. He's out there, and having problems. And these people even have the audacity to send the lookalike, but the mistake they made, they took his clothes off, right? He wears his clothes that he wore coming in, but he left his shoes that he had on. So the video shows the lookalike coming on with his shoes, but when he leaves and with Khashoggi's clothing, he has his shoes still left on, which is pretty funny. and then he hops around a taxi, and they show a video of him pretending to be him. And then all of a sudden he changes clothes again, like magically the guy disappeared. I mean, it's like a comedy routine what these guys try to do and pull off. It really should be the murder of the century. And yet we're dealing, unfortunately, with these regimes like we did with Russia, with oil, a killer. It's like a lot of these countries we deal with. Nigeria, I did another book in Nigeria, a failed state, and dealing with all the problems in Nigeria, the corruption there also, and environmental issues going on, and the terrorist group, Komohara, how that's a problem. It's just, unfortunately, we're getting oil from a lot of these foreign countries, which are just horrific nations, horrific countries in dealing with.
Yeah. I don't know if you did you catch our last episode we did? It was a lady, Michelle Black. Her husband, Brian Black, was a Green Beret on a mission over there. They were in Niger, Africa. And
really? Niger.
Yeah, Niger, yeah.
Okay.
And they had a mission to go, I want to say it was look for somebody they suspected to be like a terrorist. Well, they knew it wasn't the best of areas, and they requested like air support and all that. Well, the air support got pulled, and they were just figuring the mission was going to be canceled. Well, they told them to go ahead on and do it anyway. And then on the way back, they were kind of getting held up by somebody, and they kind of suspected that they were holding them up on purpose to try to set up an ambush, and they did. In an ambush, and it killed 4 soldiers. I think two survived, and I didn't even really, which I don't watch the news that much, but I do remember hearing about it back then, and it happened up under I think Trump was in office then. It was 2017, I'm pretty sure. And you know, she said that she got the call from Trump. She went out and had the funeral in Arlington, and he let them come tour the White House and stuff like that. But I mean, they tried to pass it off as they were acting like cowboys on the mission, and wasn't doing things by the book, and in effect they got themselves killed, which was not the case at all. And how high and and how hard she's worked to uncover the truth on that was amazing. The book she's wrote, the people that she's talked to, I mean, she stopped at nothing to get the real truth and to make it clear.
To exonerate his name.
Yes, exactly. To exonerate his name. And
Absolutely.
I put her episode out this past Sunday on Mother's Day, just for that reason, because they had 2 small kids. And she's a hell of a fighter, man, for sure.
No, I'll look at that one. That sounds interesting here.
Yeah.
But going back with Trump, that's interesting that he did that, because when asked about, the Crown Prince bin Salman, what are you going to do about this? This is a clear, I mean, you don't do an operation, especially in Saudi Arabia, which is so controlled from the top. This doesn't get approved unless these guys approve this kind of operation. This was a major, you're going to another foreign country. You're sending a lot of assets over there. You're planning this murder, premeditated, and then you dispose about everything. And it's a target that offended you personally. Mm-hmm. Somebody who went after you personally, who did not like you, who thought he was a corrupt individual, and who was, and in fact, one of the news magazines at the time when he became Crown Prince called him the most dangerous man in the world, because he's just out there. He's out there. So Trump was asked, what are you going to do about it? And he said, well, I mean, I don't think we owe him anything. And I don't disagree. I mean, yeah, he wasn't a U.S. citizen, but he was working, living here, and his family are U.S. citizens. I think we owe the family something. Mm-hmm. And I know the International Criminal Court could investigate Turkey now. They've done a full 360 on this, and it's in their country backyard. They dismissed the whole case now, and they're giving it back to Saudis. So
they're not going to do anything.
Dummy and buddies.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that's really working out there either. So I think the United Nations needs to refer this matter to Security Council to the International Criminal Court to investigate them, because you can't have someone on that level doing these kind of things. That's just, I mean, unacceptable at any level. So as much as people can talk about it, Jamal Khashoggi, Khashoggi. He was a Washington Post columnist. Look up the story, look at the videos. Everybody educate themselves about it and say there has to be accountability here. In fact, Biden hasn't even really talked to him since he's been president. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's why they haven't, put more oil out for us. Yeah. And he's even threatened us that he'll become chummy more with the Russians and Chinese. So what kind of people are they, huh?
Yeah.
That shows that. That's that. But so that those books have been they're fun to write. I enjoy going to these things. I also, of course, my autobiography, which is my longest book. That's over 20,000 words there. And I know I need to talk a few cases. I can talk about a couple things for my book. I think will be interesting. I am going to have some promos out on it. I know this is probably coming out like a week from now, right? I would imagine.
A couple weeks, yeah.
A couple weeks from now. So I'll have other books available. So this weekend I'm going to have my autobiography available, which may be something we'll talk about more. With these cases, and I was, because I worked undercover in my investigations. A lot of them I did locally. I didn't go. Let's say I worked a lot in Tampa and Miami. Mm-hmm. I had 2 small girls. I just couldn't go and be gone 5 months and be gone. So I was both the case agent, the undercover. I did everything else. So I was not just the undercover. I ran the case. I was also the case agent. So you got a lot of responsibilities. You're not just the undercover, do the report. Here you go. Here's the case agent. No, I had wore that hat. I did the undercover work part of it. I also was the vault custodian, handled all the property issues. I did all my own workups. So I took a different approach to it, because I wasn't the type of guy that was going to go and be gone for 6 months. I need to be home and help out. That just wasn't going to be working out for me. So the other case, I worked in that manner. So one of the guys, and it's not just about cases too. I talk about, the good, the bad, and the ugly with ATF. Mm-hmm. The good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, I put stuff on there, waste, fraud, and abuse, things that happened that were wrong. And I call things, because you can talk about it even then, but there's consequences, right?
Right.
But once so listen, I'm retired. Now these, and it is out there. It's out there. I mean, when you have a supervisor, I'll put this story out there. And this was in Tampa, that spends, 3.5 years, 4 or 5 years driving an H2, a Hummer 2, and you live 40 some miles away from the office because you're upset with a agent in the office who was undercover, and this vehicle is only meant to use for undercover work, right? And you decide to take it and use it for your personal vehicle. And you know what do you get, 9 miles to the gallon? an H2 maybe, and you're filling up each way to go back and forth, well, you should have a regular vehicle, and then you're doing that for 3 and maintenance vehicle, all that. That is a waste of money. And
Yeah.
there's no way around that, and that is just wrong, wrong as a day is long.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things. If you want to know what, and I put a lot of stuff out there, which these are first-hand accounts. This is not research, which I did with other stuff. First-hand accounts that I put in the book, what I saw. And I had a clear record. My file is clear. I did not have any investigations. I did not have any open scandals in the paper about so-and-so slept with so-and-so, the prosecutor. You hear cases where agents sleep with prosecutors on their cases and it becomes front page or whatever. You didn't see anything like that with me. You had a guy who was squared away. I did it by the book and I did it right. And I'm proud of that. And I did it right. And stuff you see, unfortunately, is wrong, man. It's wrong.
Yeah, we've talked with a number of ATF agents on this show. I think me and you were discussing it. You could almost do a whole chapter episodes with ATF agents. But we had Jay Dobbins on here, Lou Velozzi. We've got a few more actually coming up a little bit later on down the pipe, plus yourself. And people have. It just depends on your experiences, man. I mean, obviously Jay didn't have the best ending. How his stuff ended up. Lou didn't necessarily, he had some that say that he had some of the experience Jay had, but I think just the idea of what he was doing, he told a really, interesting story about a guy when they were doing that storefront sting where he became really close with the guy. And the guy thwarted off some robberies when people tried to come in and try to rob him. He would give them information. I mean, yeah, he was doing this not knowing they were cops, but at the same time, he was still helping him. You're around somebody that long, you kind of become, give a friendship with him. And when he ultimately got arrested, like he was already on his second strike. So they knew he was going to be a third strike. He was going away for 20 years. And he went and testified like at his trial, told the judge like everything that he did to help him and all that, hoping that it would help, a little bit. And he said, the judge looked at him and he said, he didn't help you because you were a cop. He helped you because he thought you were a gangster. He's like, bam, 20 years. I mean, just, like that. And he said, when that happened, that just kind of opened his eyes and was just like, man, am I really doing the right thing here? I mean, he was doing the right thing, but it's just, you kind of start to get torn for a little bit.
I kept that. And I saw people doing that because I was around a lot of undercovers and I knew I went to a lot of schools and these undercover schools, and you have to understand, I am there to gain evidence and put these people away. I'm not a gangster. I'm not a trafficker. I'm not a drug dealer. I'm just pretending to be one. I'm an investigator. And I always understood that. I'm a role player. I am playing a role to get the evidence I need to put these guys in jail. And that has been my mindset. And I did it for many years, 14, 15 years of undercover work. And later I got a little tired. I went to trafficking group and I decided to promote. And I ended up going to ATF headquarters. And that was fascinating. That was eye-opening. That's why I ended up in Northern Virginia doing the work I did here 2 years. And I became very close with some of the higher in commands up here. And it's just seeing the inside workings was really fascinating to me, being in the street and see how things working out there. So just one case that I mentioned that, and I'll mention one guy, and this was probably one of the worst guys I dealt with. I dealt with a lot of groups. So this guy really was a piece of work. He was a career offender. He was involved in a few attempted homicides, 2 against Leos in Miami. And looking at the record, this was back in 1980. So you understand, this is a Cuban guy. And he was in a pursuit and a chase with City of Miami, right? And he had drugs in the car. He was driving. He had a passenger side. High pursuit, shots are being fired back and forth, right? And all of a sudden, the cops have to slam in the brakes in the vehicle. Something came in on the way because they're blowing through stop signs. They're blowing through lights. It's one of those kind of crazy type deals. And the cops fell out of their vehicles, which was crazy. He repositioned the vehicle so the passengers can open up and shoot the cops and kill them. So this is the kind of, thank goodness he missed. He didn't kill these guys, but it got ugly. The situation got ugly. They got arrested, they got popped, and he only got 30 years. I think a guy like that should never get out.
Yeah.
So this is 2000, this is 1980, 30 years later, 2011. I get a phone call from a target that I'm dealing with. I've been buying doping guns from him. He has a few felony convictions, and I've been buying stuff from him. And he says, hey, listen, this is Spanish. I got this guy here, called Chino. He's my friend, my partner, and we just got some guns, seeing if you want to buy them. And so I put the phone to him, and we started talking. And he said, yeah. And these guns are really, really hot. So I know they're stolen. So I said, well, what kind in Spanish, what kind of, ¿qué tipo de arma? What kind of calibers? What kind of guns you have? And he tells me he has all kinds, from 9s to 40s. He has handguns, rifles, shotguns. He got everything. I said, okay, perfect. I have an undercover apartment, which that was in Pasco County, which is a county north of Hillsborough, where Tampa is. And I used to work a lot with the sheriff's office there, a lot of big cases and stuff. In fact, I took down one of the biggest years earlier. I took down one of the most dangerous street gangs out there, the Valentine Bloods. And that was a 2.5-year investigation. And that made a huge impact in the community out there. That was more in West Side Pasco. So I said, okay, that's fine. I set up the meeting, and I have my apartment. It's all wired for video, sound, and also the cover team can hear me. So I've been using this one, and this is a gem because it's perfect. People come in, it's not cool. Sometimes you're outside somewhere and you get all this outside activity. It is quiet, it's nice in here. Perfect recordings, which is what you want. You want to give good evidence to the prosecutor so you can put these guys away. So he comes in, these guys come in, they both brought their 2 cars, and they bring in a dolly in one and a dresser. And I said, man, that dresser looks heavy. So hey, you got everything in here? He said, yeah, it's in here. So they come in the apartment, close the door, and they're taking out the drawers, and they put the guns all inside, and then close the top so it would seal up. So you look like a good drawer and couldn't open it. So they opened that up, and all the guns were there, like over 16 of them. Right. So they start taking, that's great because they got all the cameras with the videos all in there, and that is just perfect. And this guy, he's a career offender, and he's handling all the weapons. He's giving it to the other guy who's also a felon, and he's giving it to me, and they're possessing it. I mean, this is fantastic evidence. You couldn't, it's a dream prosecution, right? And that's what I worked on. I worked on my case to make them that way. It doesn't work out that way, but you try to present the best investigation. So in case it goes to trial, the jury can feel good about their verdict. Right. And that's what the key is right there, because if they can't feel good about the verdict and they don't want to, they're not going to convict the guy. And you got to get 12 people, which is very difficult sometimes to agree on anything.
Right. So all see beyond a reasonable doubt that he did it. You only need one.
And 99% of the cases I won. 99%, maybe 1 or 2. Right. And I had a very good track record. So okay, so they open everything up.
Lou mentioned there's a video. It's hard to beat video evidence, man. That's hard.
It is. That's why I like them. That's why you have to do it. You have to give them the best. Not just give them everything. Make it a movie. You make it a movie, people are happy.
Yeah, because they're gonna plea or whatever, just plead guilty or try to take a plea bargain or whatever, because you can't fight that.
And the jurors go home with a clear conscience. They feel good. They made the right, and that's what you want to do. I mean, these are average folks that put in a tough situation to try to make, and that's why most of the cases played out, because a lot of people know, defenses know that they don't have a chance. Their guy doesn't have a chance.
Yeah.
So the guy empties everything out. They take the dresser back in their vehicles. I think one had a pickup truck and one had another car. They come back in and we start bullshitting inside, just to start talking and everything else. See what else this guy's going to say. And yeah, he said, yeah, they have a window company. And a lot of times they pretend, they work on windows sometimes. And then they go in and they see a house is vacant. They have the truck out there and the house looks empty. So they go around. It's like, oh, they're working on windows. Again, the windows, they start taking the stuff, and that's what we did here. And these guns were taken from a prominent member of the county who was tight with the sheriff, who used to also work for the sheriff. So this case got their attention pretty quickly. So, by the time I meet with this Chino guy, and his name's in the book and everything else, I already knew his whole history, attempted murder and illegals, and I knew everything about him that he would never guess. And then he starts, conversation. Yeah, I'm from Key West. I was born in Key West. I spent time in Miami. I'm now in Tampa, but I like Pasco also. And then he starts bragging. Oh, but I was in the city of Miami, and these cops tried to kill me. They couldn't kill me, and I shot at them. And he's boasting and bragging and saying, "Oh, keep on talking, dude. Keep on talking." And I know you'll have your time. So we left, and we'll continue. We're going to do things. And a few weeks later, we arrest him, and it feels very gratifying because he was already in his mid-50s then. He had also some other state charges. He pleads guilty, and he gets 30 years.
Yeah, essentially a life sentence.
He's done because he had to do some other time. So he's not going to get out in his 90s because he has other health issues and stuff. So those are the kind of targets you really feel good about yourself. You put your good case together. You take a guy like that who wants to kill law enforcement and do harm to the community. and make it better. And this is the kind of case I do. That's why I hope people can read my book, ATF Undercover. Detailed cases, a lot of cases. I was talking about home invasion cases. These are crews where myself, my partner, would meet with these active home invaders who do rips of cocaine stash houses, and we dealt with them. And this is in the Orlando area, and I put some detail in there. And these guys would say, yeah, we're bringing body bags, and they're bringing all the artillery, and this is their terms, and they don't care. And they're ready to pretty much rock and roll. They're really go armed and kill guys who are armed themselves inside these places to steal cocaine. Jeez. And that's out there on the street. And that's out there on the street, man. And you're dealing with that. So, and those meetings go bad too. I mean, you meet with these guys and they get a whiff of something going on. It could be lights out.
Oh yeah.
I mean, any one of these meetings.
Bullet in you quick if they suspect anything.
Like they suspect anything, or they can get out. They'll do it. And then for those kind of takedowns, we have the SWAT team. We have big take. I mean, these are big operations that we go and take these kind of, because they're bad actors and they're making the streets safe. So if you like those kind of cases, I mean, I've done a line. I also talk about international trafficking. I mean, I have such a good variety of kind of work that I've done that I think people will like it, will enjoy reading about it.
Oh, absolutely.
And then also about the abuses that I saw firsthand, waste, fraud, and abuse in Tampa, in Miami. There's a lot of it. Bad supervisors. We talked about last time dealing with bad supervisors.
Mm-hmm.
Who was that wrestler that you mentioned? That deal last time we were talking about. I know you're a big wrestling fan.
Yeah. What was the subject there?
Bad boss. You said, well, I like my boss now, but there were certain bosses in the past.
Oh yeah. I had one boss, man. I worked at this steel company for years, a big steel company. I'm not even gonna say the name of it, but he was the type of guy that if you looked at him, you knew that he probably wasn't very popular in high school. Probably had like 2 friends, right. And got into this job, made his way. When he got this supervisory role, that was his chance to flaunt authority. And he never liked me, and I never liked him. It was just from day one. Nobody had to do anything. Nobody had to say anything. I think he just looked at me, didn't like me, and I returned the favor. And like I would just do shit. It got to a point where it was so obvious that he didn't like me because he was giving me the shittiest things to do just to make me do them, because he knew I had to do them. I couldn't buck authority. But to combat that, I like when I would, I would get on the radio, and if I had to go to our warehouse, we had a big facility. So like our meal was here, and then sometimes we had a whole warehouse that we'd have to go get stuff from and then come back. So I would get on the radio, and these radios, everybody had a radio where we worked. So I get on the radio, I'm like, hey, I'm about to say his name. I was like, hey, your Jeep's, your lights are on. I can hear your radio playing. He's like, are you sure? I thought, I don't think I left him in there. I don't think I left the radio. And I said, oh yeah, Boy George is blasting out of there loud and clear, man. You might better turn that off. And I mean, it was just, I would do little ribs like that just to fuck with him.
Boy George.
he had this Jeep, right? It was like a 2-door like Jeep Wrangler, and I guess he decided to go like mud bogging or something before we were supposed to be at work. We were working night shift. He got the fucking Jeep stuck in the mud, so he called this other guy that was, you always got that one guy that's at work like an hour early, before he's supposed to be there, and he called him, I guess, to see if he could swing by and help pull him out. So he wound up making that guy late, because they both almost got stuck. We finally got them out. Well, the next day, we used to have safety meetings every morning before work. So the next day, this guy, and me and him were pretty tight too, his safety meeting was Jeep safety. And he fucking cut him off. He didn't even let him do the thing. He was just we need something realistic here. And all that. I mean, he was just pissed. Those. Yeah, he was just pissed because he was getting embarrassed. But, and I had some in that same place that were really cool. It's just, some people, and I think a lot of my friends too in high school that went on to be cops and law enforcement, when I go back now and I see them home, it's like all the same types of groups of people that went on to be law enforcement too. I don't know if it's just when you have that badge, if you get a feel of authority or something like that. Now, granted, I know some guys that said they wanted to be cops, and that was always a goal of theirs, but some of them, I was just like, why the hell would you? I never pictured them as a cop for forever. But then when I hear stories, it makes sense.
Some people get like the Napoleonic complex, little man complex.
Yes.
And
that's what he had. Yeah.
He had a little man complex. Yeah. Little man complex. And they have the chip on their shoulder and they never had any respect in their life. And now I'm going to get the respect I deserve. And we dealt with people like that a lot. Yeah. Unfortunately, in law enforcement too. And they go off and they think, this is the federal government. Maybe a little different in the private sector, but here in the government, this is taxpayer money. This doesn't belong to you. This is a position where it belongs to people. You have to work together and not believe like this is your little kingdom. And some of these guys get to mind this is their kingdom, and they run it like they're a little tyrant, a little dictator. And this making these cases and how hard it is to make these cases. And they snap their fingers and expect certain things done a certain way. And I put a lot of good examples in there, man. I give the one of the Hummer there. But man, if you guys want to see some, and if you want to see what was going on, my experience, and I detail it a lot, I think you will enjoy the book, ATF Undercover. You're going to like it.
Well, speaking of books, you sent me a message, and I think it's a great idea. We're going to do a poll here on our show, and I'm trying to figure out some guys that I want to put in this poll. I don't know if I want to narrow it down to like maybe a mafia family or maybe some guys. I'm thinking some actual guys.
Okay.
That you can do. Maybe throw like John Gotti in there, maybe Anthony Gaspipe Casso, Vincent Gigante, Antonio Carter, some names like that. And we are going to put up a poll on the Crime and Entertainment site. I'm going to share it to my personal page as well. And whichever guy wins the voting, we might run it for like a week or something like that. Whoever wins the voting, you're actually going to do a book on, right?
That's right. That's right.
Well, that
detailed book.
Yeah, detailed book. That is cool. So folks, when this drops, I'll make sure to have that poll up this week when this episode drops. And that'll be very cool, kind of a first interactive thing here with Crime and Entertainment. Whoever you guys vote for to get a story on, Iggy will do a deep dive in there and put a book out, and you guys can go pick that up from Amazon. You still have everything pretty much from you is on Amazon now, correct? They can just go there. I think I have your link from last time. I'll just repeat that up.
Yeah. Just type in my name. Ignacio J. Esteban, and then IGNACIO, obviously J. Esteban, ESTEBAN, and you see I'm at now 37 books. Wow. I'm losing count. My goal, Wade, is to hit over 100.
Wow. Well, you're on your way, man. I can tell you that.
I'm on my way, man. That's my goal, and I hope people. And again, there's short reads. I think I explained it last time. They're not going to be 400-page books. These books are between 20, 25 pages, some a little less, some a little more. Autobiography is longer. It's about almost 60-something pages. But you'll get something like, let's say you didn't know anything about the Yakuza, or you didn't know anything about Nigeria or the Saudis. You'll get a good feel and you get good information. I'll be honest, I researched it. I just didn't put, it's not fiction. This is nonfiction. This is nonfiction.
Just like that little insert you told me about Traficante doing a year in jail over there in Cuba. I didn't know that. So, really good information there for people that want to, like you said, do these quick reads and, get some information that maybe they hadn't heard about it. I think this is going to be very cool. So I'm excited to see who the listeners and the audience will pick. And I'll be looking forward to that when it drops. Sure.
We can do it if you want. This one will be La Cosa Nostra. And then we can go next one to the 1%ers. Maybe some people want a deep dive on Sonny Berger. Barger.
For sure.
They want a deep dive on Cavazos.
Yeah, Cavazos, Barger. You got Taco Bowman from the Outlaws. I mean, a lot of good. Yeah, no, that sounds like a cool thing, man. We could just do a continuous running poll, and we can help get you up to 100 real quick.
But yeah, absolutely. Hollywood, wait, that'd be awesome.
All right, man. Well, I couldn't thank you enough for stopping by the show again. Always a pleasure to have you. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am Hollywood Wade. That was Ignacio Esteban. And unfortunately, we are out of time. Tune in next week for an all-new episode of Crime and Entertainment. Iggy, we appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you, brother. Be safe.